We are live with SCI TV. I'm Joshua Gordon, the founder of the Sports Conflict Institute. Today we have a very large but fantastic panel to talk about student-athlete experience, including my co-host Shannon Leinert. Shannon, welcome first. So I'm going to do a quick introduction to who you are, and then we'll get into our panel as well.
All right, great. So I'm a professor at the University of Missouri in Columbia. I'm also a practitioner for Sports Conflict Institute. And in my spare time, I'm a professional runner and working towards the Olympics in 2016. And I'm running a small company with my family. So I have a lot of hats on in one given day, but I'm excited to be here.
And a former student athlete and still balancing athletics and your professional career as well. So you'll have a lot to contribute beyond being a co-host as well today. So thank you for joining us. Ian, let's start with you as well. Welcome, Ian Dobson. Why don't you give a little intro of who you are as we go through our panel of welcoming everyone?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Josh. My name is Ian Dobson. I was a student athlete at Stanford University from 2000 to 2005. I was part of 2 NCAA championship teams and one NCAA championship myself. So I ran cross country, indoors, and outdoor track. I went on and ran professionally for the next about 8 years. I made the 2008 Olympic team at 5,000 meters. I retired or quit, whatever we decide on, after the 2012 trials, and have been coaching and running a nonprofit called Team Eugene ever since. I now work for Track Time USA here in Eugene, and getting some breadth of experience, all still in the sport.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Ian. You've got a number of ways that you have experienced that balance between being a student athlete, and both from a coach's perspective, from an athlete's perspective, and really at the highest level of sport and in a very demanding institution as well. So really look forward to your insights.
Thanks.
Zach, let's go to you next.
Yeah, hi. So I was a student athlete at Creighton University, played baseball there, and currently I am a University of Oregon MBA student. So in between there, I played professionally in the Red Sox organization for about 5 or 6 years, and as Ian said, I don't know if I retired or quit or what the right term is, but I had some injuries, so yeah, it kind of forced me into retirement and came back to school and just finishing up now.
Do you still do athletics at all in any capacity, even while you're in your MBA, or where are you at with your athletic career?
I just kind of do stuff for fun now. It's more playing intramural basketball and stuff like that, and some sports like that, but nothing at a serious level anymore.
Okay, well, certainly that balance that you've had to strike throughout your baseball career as well, and trying to figure out how to build a career beyond sports, is going to be invaluable to our conversation today. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And our final set on the panel here is a husband and wife couple who both have student athlete credentials, and we have our youngest member ever on our Google Hangout SCI TV show joining us as well. So Bethany and Stetson, welcome, and why don't you say hello to our guests, to our audience.
So I'll start. So I'm Bethany Bear, and I was a former UO volleyball player. I also spent 3 years playing at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah, before I transferred after I married Stetson. So I just graduated last June with my degree in sociology, and I'm currently a stay-at-home mom.
I'm Stetson Bear. I'm currently playing football for the University of Oregon. Had the opportunity of playing in the first playoff system this year, which was a lot of fun. Then 2 days after the national championship, our newest member, Coda, member of our family, was added, and so he's here with us today, and just trying to go to school and play football and run my brother's business. So it's a lot of fun.
Congratulations, and certainly you both exemplify that balance you're trying to strike between the student-athlete experience, and you're throwing all kinds of experiences into the mix beyond just what is involved in terms of your actual playing demands as well. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start with a wide-open question, and then Shannon and I are going to kind of trade off prompting some questions, but for each of you, please feel free to throw some questions into the mix too. It's meant to be a conversation with all of us. let's start with how you would characterize your student-athlete experience overall, whether positive or negative, or at least some of the challenges that you faced. And each of you went through it at different phases. So why don't we start with that? How would you characterize your student-athlete experience overall? And why don't we go in the order that we started with the first time? So Ian, why don't we start with you?
Great. Yeah. I mean, there's no question that my student-athlete experience was positive. It was like overwhelmingly positive. I mean, that's the interesting part of it, is how do you make it positive, right? Because it's not a simple, straightforward thing. But I came away with a degree from a great university and just a fantastic athletic experience. I do think that one of the, maybe this doesn't address the question exactly, but I think one of the things that was interesting to me, and I'm really interested in everyone's perspective on this, is sort of having to choose at some point whether or not I was going to really invest in academics or in athletics. And some people can do both at the highest level. I didn't feel like I was able to. And I think I saw it in a lot of my teammates too, where at some point, in the middle of your college experience, people would decide whether or not they thought a professional career was realistic, or whether they were heading that direction. And a lot of people for whom it was not an option or was not a track ended up sort of, taking a small step away athletically, still on the team, still running successfully, but you could see their momentum shifting towards the academic side. I had the opposite experience. I really saw athletics as a professional career track and missed out on a lot of opportunities academically. I mean, it was a conscious choice, and I wouldn't change it. I'd love to be able to do it a second time, but that was one of the hardest things for me in that experience, was knowing as I'm going through this that I'm making a conscious decision to miss out on a lot of really amazing opportunities that any school provides. Stanford in particular has just fantastic academic opportunities. So even though I came away with a totally positive, great experience, there was always conflicting in my mind as to whether or not I wanted to really 100% in this way, 100% in that way, and always feeling that balance being the tough thing.
Hey, your fellow alum, Richard Sherman, was talking quite a bit about that challenge of balancing the academic side with the athletic side, and that there's just some opportunities that if you're going to dedicate yourself to the sport, you simply can't avail yourself to. Do you remember a couple of those in particular that jumped out?
Right from the start, I mean, the biggest one is choosing a major. I think that there are people who are more intelligent than I am who can probably choose some more difficult majors, but I was a political science major, largely because political science was interesting and fit, time-wise. And I'm going to name drop for a second here, but I got a chance to meet the actor Andy Buckley, who plays in The Office, this summer. He is also a political science major at Stanford, and we joked about how both of us had like this other thing going on, so we had to like choose a major that fit with that, And it was really interesting to hear that from a totally non-athletic perspective, but someone who also had this somewhat non-traditional career track going as a student, and he picked a major the same way I did, through that same sort of lens of like, hey, I want to come away with a valuable degree, and I want it to fit with my athletic goals.
Great. And Shannon, let me throw you in the mix on this first question as well. You've had kind of ups and downs in your student-athlete experience as you look back on it. Can you share a little bit about how you characterize your student-athlete experience too?
Well, I like to mostly draw my experiences to my graduate work and my PhD, because when I was working on my PhD, I was also trying to run professionally and try to make the Olympics and like be like the top 3 in the U.S. and I ended up being like 15th. So I fell short of that goal. But like at the same time, I was really similar to Ian, and I was like, I remember going on a run and crying because I was just like, I can't give running 100%, and I can't give school 100%. One's gonna have to give. And then one of my best friends just kind of said to me, no, you can do it, you can do both, which really makes me excited to ask like Stetson and Bethany there about like how are they able to balance the family with this. I mean, I know that Bethany's not technically this athlete like right now, but I mean, just I want to hear from their perspective like how they're able to, kind of balance all of these things in their life, and is that helpful for their athletic careers, or is that something that they feel is hindering? And it's kind of like what Ian said, it's always about your attitude and like how you're going to look at it, like what your outlook is going to be. So I'm going to pass it on to them real quick.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'll kind of go ahead and talk first, and then he can add his 2 cents. So people talk about how, we get the comment a lot that it would be super hard to be married. How are you married as an athlete? That would be really hard. But I have found that it was a lot easier for us because we were both in similar situations, and so we could understand each other. But more than that, we could kind of, help each other out. And especially since we were in sports the same seasons, it wasn't like it was one of us that was sitting at home in the off season while, the other was traveling every weekend. We were kind of in that same flow at the same time. And so it was actually really helpful to be able to support each other in that, but also to understand, what that was like for the other person. I have teammates that have tried to date, and have dated individuals that don't really understand what it takes to be a student athlete, and that's kind of been a problem for them and been a little bit of a distraction. So I think for us it was actually helpful to kind of have that support system there. Stetson now, I honestly don't know how he does it. I'll let him try and answer that. As far as balancing everything he has to balance, I don't know. I'm constantly amazed, so I'll let him go ahead and.
So it definitely is a challenge, but being married and having a family, I think it puts your priorities in line. Really gives you that check. I had an awesome opportunity to serve a 2-year mission for our church before I went on to play college sports, and so I think that helped out a lot. But being able to come home on the weekends and be with my wife and not have to worry about going out with my friends and doing all that kind of stuff after the week is over and stuff, it's a huge opportunity to get ahead on things. I have that time where I don't have to think about who am I going to date this week, what party are we going to go to. It's not an option because I come home, I have a family to support. I want my wife to have the opportunity to be able to be a stay-at-home mom if she pleases, and that's something that she wants to do right now with our new boy. And so being able to prioritize and realize that, okay, I've got so many hours for football, I've got so many hours for school, I've got so many hours for work, and then come home and be with my wife and son. And it's just something that puts everything in line. It does seem hard, and it is hard at first, but once you realize that, I've got to provide for my family. I think that school's actually gotten easier because now I'm like, okay, this is real. I've got to pass my classes. I've got to be on top of things to be able to support my family, and so it's kind of helped me stay focused on what I'm really doing here, and that is to get my degree. I love playing sports and I love playing football, but for us, the big picture is more than just sports, and so I think that's been a big help for me in my career and the things that we've done together as a family. So
to Ian's point from earlier, as we know, roughly only 2% of student athletes that are on scholarship go on to compete professionally, and we've got several of you here on the panel who have done that. Is that part of your balancing act, that you guys have been struggling with, or is that something that you've known for a while, saying maybe no, this is a part of my career development, but not where our career is headed? Where does that stand for both of you?
I knew once I got married that I probably wouldn't go play professionally. Volleyball's a little bit difficult because the only way that you can play professionally is to go overseas. The United States currently, other than the Olympic team, doesn't have a professional organization. And, so it's a great opportunity to be able to kind of travel and to enjoy other cultures. But I knew once I got married that probably wouldn't be an option for me because he would still have to be here. And as much as I love volleyball, being in a different country than my husband for 9 months of the year, just really, it didn't sound super fun to me. So.
And I've actually had the great opportunity. My brother plays for the Eagles right now, and he has a wife. He also played for the University of Oregon and had a kid here also at the same time because he was going through school. And so I have somebody to look up to, and I have that example to see how he balanced everything out. But seeing him in the NFL and seeing his career go on and what it's done to his body has honestly made me rethink, what do I really want to do? Is the professional career in football really for me? And so by that, it's been hard the last year to kind of decide, okay, am I going to pursue that or am I not going to pursue that? And so that's something that we kind of balance out there. But I'm lucky to have my brother there that I can call and I can, okay, so how did you do this? What were the steps that you went through? And so I have a kind of a support system that most people don't have going into that with our situation. So.
Great. And Zach, let's introduce you here and some of that balancing act that you've had to deal with over your career, and you've gone through a couple levels of education as well, and trying to figure out how to steer and make those choices that everyone on this panel has wrestled with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I've dealt with many of the issues everyone's already talked about. You know, Ian talked about trying to focus 100% on the plane versus 100% on school, and for me, I think it was it wasn't that I wasn't a good student, but it was I didn't really take the time to really figure out what I wanted to do past school when I was an undergrad, and I was more focused on the plane. So, and that's part of the reason why I came back to school, and it's been a different experience this time. I can actually focus on figuring out what I want to do past that, and but I mean, overall though, the student athlete experience has been very positive for me, and it put me in gave me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to have. So, yeah, I mean, overall, it's been a great experience. So,
Zach, do you think a lot of your teammates were similar to you, or do you think, in regards to like focusing on academics or not focusing on academics, do you think that that was a pretty common trend within your team, or was it more specific to someone of your nature who you kind of knew that you might go and play at least minor leagues, maybe even major league?
yeah, I mean, I definitely think it varies, especially in a sport like baseball where there's about 30 of us on a team, and I definitely felt like I had the opportunity to play at that next level, but I mean, I feel like it's an issue for a lot of different for all different levels that trying to figure out exactly what you want to do, and it's tough to devote 100% of your time towards school when you're also trying to put in, you're on the road all the time, and you have all those challenges to deal with as well. So it's just a difficult thing to balance, and I think it's just something you kind of got to figure out what's important to you, and it's not an easy thing to answer.
I think if I could jump on that, I kind of like the like, I guess when I was like 20 years old, it was pretty daunting to try to think like, I know what I'm going to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And being an athlete, you end up with the opportunity to say, if you're going to have a professional career, to sort of redefine yourself later on. So I got to sort of make that transition when I was 30 years old, rather than when I was 22 or something. And I feel like at 30 years old, much more capable of going on and making a more thoughtful decision around how I want to spend the rest of my life, what career I want, than I did when I was 22. When I was 22, I don't know if I necessarily felt like that, and there are certainly some real challenges around making a career shift at 30 years old, as I did, but it kind of speaks, I think, to what Zach is saying there. Like it's it's tough to know what you want to do when you're in school, and it just, in some ways, it's kind of liberating to not necessarily feel like you have to be making that decision right now. That come June, you got to find a job in your field or whatever. So.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that 100%, and that's a lot of the reason why I came back to school, because I didn't know exactly what I studied accounting in undergrad, and I got out and I done playing, and I was like, I don't really want to be an accountant, so I ended up coming back to school. But yeah, to your point, like, I have a much better understanding of what I want to do now, and so in a lot of ways it's been beneficial to me to kind of have that period where I got to play a sport and kind of figure things out later in life when I'm have a better grasp on what I like doing and whatnot.
Yeah.
And were there people in your lives as student athletes that helped you at least figure out which doors to keep open and which ones to allow to shut as you were navigating some of these things? Yes, you can defer some of these decisions to later, but there are some doors that close depending on some of the choices you're making along the way. For those of you on the panel, and jump in if this resonates, but were there particular mentors or resources that really helped you and supporting you on some of these paths as well. Zach, maybe stay with you, and then we can work through a little bit.
I guess for me, you know, I was fortunate enough to have a brother that played on the baseball team and was 2 years older than me. He played at Creighton as well. So I guess it was always nice to have him as a resource if I was going through anything. You know, he'd already been there, and I always kind of looked up to him. So I would say him, or just going to. There are some assistant coaches that I had pretty good bonds with. So you know, I would talk to them if I had any issues or anything. But other than that, those are probably the two main resources I use.
Great. Others on the panel that you were thinking about, folks that really resonated in terms of helping guide you and steer you and things that have been useful? And because I think when other student athletes look to this conversation, they're looking to see what are those resources available to them that can help them, because they're trying to figure out where to go and what to do and what things to balance in this really challenging scenario.
One thing that I guess I'll kind of jump in there. One thing that the University of Oregon has done really well is we have a couple people who are on the football team, and when you become a junior or senior in the program, they start having you fill out questionnaires on jobs and things that you're interested in, and alumni that you would like to meet along the way that would be able to help you be in the career after football's over. With people who have gone through different things, people who have started businesses themselves, and that's a great program that the football team here uses. We have a lot of support over at the Jacob building. Also, a lot of people in there who will help you search careers and search different things that would help you get into those things. But it's an awesome opportunity to be able to play for a university that has such good alumni who have played in the past and stuff, who come back and offer their services. The guy was showing us all the emails that he's had from people who have been here before saying what athletes interested in going into medicine, what athletes are interested in going into business, and just so on and so forth. And so that's been a great tool and a great opportunity at the University of Oregon that they provided for us. And so I think that's something that's helped me, is they're able to say, okay, you're interested in this, you've run a business, you've done this, you've done that. These are the people who have done those same things. Let's get you connected with them. And so that's something that's pretty cool.
You know, Stanford had great academic support and everything, and I think that that's probably actually really evolved. I mean, what I know about the University of Oregon's athletic support is pretty phenomenal. It sounds fantastic. And I think that at Stanford we had some similar resources that were really, you know, probably really helpful for people. I never really used them all that much. I had anytime I needed academic support, it was there. There's no question about it. And I leaned heavily on that a couple times. But as far as like the track of like how I was going to spend my time, how I was going to prioritize things, what classes I would really focus on, I found my teammates to be the most helpful. Like, I had a team of about 30 guys, and you know, they were all my closest friends. And running, you know, is a little bit different than some other sports in that we don't have, like, our practice is largely just like going out and running together. So you spend a lot of time just like hanging out, kind of. And so I'm projecting here. I don't really know what football practice or baseball practice is like, but I imagine there's more skill development than running, where you just go run. And so in that way, I think a lot of teammates do. But I really leaned on those guys, and I think they did on me too. I think we all just sort of were our own little, you know, advisory center out there on, you know, the 2-hour runs or something, just talking through this stuff, you know. And it's we knew each other well, and I felt like there was a group of smart guys, and so I honestly can't ever remember taking advantage of any like academic advising sort of resources that may have existed. And I know they existed. For me, it was more like, if I have a total emergency, I'll go to the academic resource center. But for the most part, it was just like, you know, we've got guys on the team that are 2, 3, 4 years older than me when I start, and they were great models.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Ian. I have to agree. I have some regrets by way of not really using the resources that were available to me, because just like he pointed out, the University of Oregon does a great job of kind of looking beyond your athletic career and making sure that you're prepared for life outside of college, and they have a great program here. And I'm not sure how universal it is as far as, you know, other universities having a similar program, but they call it Senior Success. And what they focus on is kind of career skills. And so they do, so, you know, 5 or 6 seminars where they teach you about building a resume and networking and dressing for interviews and, you know, etiquette at a dinner table and things like that. And Seth and I had the opportunity to participate in that last year, and that was, you know, really cool for me because that's not something that I had a lot of experience with, and I probably wouldn't have really gone out on my own and sought that out. And so that was really cool. And just as Ian said, I wish that I would have used those resources a little bit more, because I know that there's people at our academic center that are more than happy to look over your resume and to kind of help you fine tune it, and just a lot of resources that are available that, you know, are extremely helpful if you take advantage of them.
Well, what were some of the barriers that were keeping you guys from using those resources? I know that I did use my resources as much as possible, and I think that's a huge strength of mine. Like, I'm always constantly reaching out to people and networking, and I remember using my resources pretty heavily. But from people, from your experiences as like someone who's not using them as much, like what were some barriers or, you know, reasons behind that?
I think that one of the big barriers that we have is we have a different situation, but we're at sports and we're at those events all day long. And so it's like you're at practice and you're going in at night for meetings and then you're going to class in between. And so it was like that was one more thing to add into your schedule. And it was like you just didn't want it. Like you wanted to be able to have the free time. You wanted to be able to just relax and come home. And so I think that's probably the biggest factor for me is just laziness.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree that I think part of it's just the time, and you know, like you said, you don't have a lot of it when you're a student athlete, and maybe you just want to grab a nap or whatever. So I think maybe like having something that was made a little more structured might be helpful, and to where they're almost reaching out to you versus you reaching out to them. That would definitely, I think, be a helpful resource.
Yeah.
Another thing I liked about football, what they've done normally, or they've started doing this year with our team, is they've started making it a mandatory meeting. Like they said, okay, you're here at this time, and all the seniors and all the juniors go in and, okay, fill out this paperwork, do this. It's kind of one of those things that they're not making us come in more. They're just scheduling it in to our lifts and into our running. Say, okay, now that you're here, just come up here for 15 minutes. And so it doesn't really take as much out of our time, which I have found a lot easier to be able to do. So.
Awesome.
I think those are the primary reasons that you two just mentioned that I probably didn't utilize the academic resources as much as I should have. But I think another reason that, you know, if I'm really being honest with myself about why I didn't, there was a lot of like athletic arrogance in my case where I was like, I'm an athlete, I'm going to run professionally, and, you know, I'm smart enough that I can get by without like really having to reach out to these resources. And those things were true, I think, and you know, I did get by, and I was an athlete, but it was almost like this hesitance to concede that you could do two things. You know, you could really ask for help academically, and it wasn't a zero-sum thing where that comes at the expense of any time, effort, and energy or whatever that you're putting into sports. So to me, it was almost like this arrogance of like, I'm gonna run professionally anyway. I'm getting by. Like, you know, I know I'm not going to go study abroad. I know I don't have time to do some of these things that I sort of caricaturized academic support or academic opportunities as being, and didn't realize that I think a lot of those things happened on campus and happened in ways that were compatible with athletics, the way I was doing it. And I think that, you know, I'm remembering back, it's been a while now, remembering back to some things that were sort of mandated academic support and kind of rolling my eyes at the time. But I'm sure that those were far more important than I realized. Like, it was, you know, I think those are good.
So one of the things that we've seen at times as a barrier for student athletes is this idea that if you're planning for your future and your life beyond sport, that you're also planning to end sport, right? and that somehow that you're not fully dedicated or committed to your sport if you're already thinking ahead. And we see this at all levels of sport, whether it's the NFL struggles with this internally, that the moment you're thinking about your life, which is going to be maybe 3 years in the league, that you're already giving up on and maybe your dedication is questioned. Have any of you faced some of those challenges, whether it's from coaches or teammates or whoever else is in your life, that if you are starting to talk and think about things beyond sport, that somehow you aren't fully dedicated to the sport itself, and that might be a performance barrier?
Well, I think it wasn't really externally that I felt that. I think that internally I cared so much about playing and being an athlete, and that was really my main focus. I mean, if I'm honest, academics is the backseat to my athletic, career, and so I think that for me to plan after graduation, I didn't want to really accept the fact that I eventually wasn't going to be a student athlete anymore. And in hindsight, it actually backfired because I had a really hard time after I was done with volleyball because I didn't have a plan, and I didn't really utilize those resources to help me plan, my next step. And so I spent a lot of time just lamenting the fact that I was done instead of moving on to, to what was next in my life. So.
Great. Other similar experiences, different experiences around that idea of, if you're planning for something beyond sport, that somehow you're not focused on what you're supposed to be focused on?
I think that's definitely happened to me also. As we started to plan our family and started to plan our future and what we wanted to do, the more I started thinking about that, the more I got thinking, I was like, can I play football at the same time? And so it was a distraction at first. It was like, okay, do I quit football to pursue the family and that kind of lifestyle? And luckily I have an awesome wife who just kept on saying, you're going to regret it, you're going to regret it. And kept me focused on the sport and continue to play. But I think that the more I focused on things outside of sports, the more I did lose focus of the sport I was playing. And so it did make it harder.
It sounds like a lot of internal maybe pressures that you guys are kind of putting on yourself. And I feel like a common theme that I'm hearing across everybody is just kind of, and you haven't used this word, so I want to know if this is how you think about it. But from my perspective, I'm hearing a lot of I feel like you sacrifice things for sport. You sacrifice academics for sport. You sacrifice maybe starting a career or starting a family for sport. So is that how you guys have looked at this for the last maybe 5-6 years of your life, or if I'm wrong completely, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I kind of look at it that way. It's definitely. I mean, I played professional baseball for 5 or 6 years, so there was, it's you kind of got to weigh, whether you want to keep pursuing that dream or you want to start a career and making money. And I think it's, you can do certain things that'll put you in a better position down the road while you're still focusing 100% on a sport. But I think it's, it's in the end your time zero sum, and whatever you do focusing on a sport is going to take away from something else. And I mean, there's definitely some kind of balance there. So, but I definitely feel like for me it was a little bit more of one or the other, not so much trying to manage both at the same time, if that makes sense.
I never felt that sense of making a sacrifice, and this is probably taking the conversation off topic, but I'll go there anyway. I never felt like it was a sacrifice until the last couple of years that I was competing, when I was and it was kind of this wake-up call, there are things that I would rather be doing than this, and at that point it did start feeling like a sacrifice. But I never felt like in college or even a number of years post-collegiately that I was sacrificing anything. It was quite the opposite. It was I know what my priority is, and if I'm making decisions that are compromising my performance, that's the sacrifice, sort of. So, but then at some point that just kind of switched, and I was like, wow, I'm sacrificing going skiing with my buddies or something, and that was kind of an indication to me that it was pretty good time to move on.
A topic that really interests me a lot around the student-athlete experience is this idea of isolation versus integration. And we've talked a few times with some different athletic directors, and there's a huge variety in philosophy around this. So you typically have folks like Yale and Harvard who make a really concerted effort to make sure that student-athletes don't live amongst themselves, and that student-athletes, in fact, always share dorm rooms their freshman year or sophomore year with other folks who are not student-athletes, and that they don't always eat together and travel together because of the fear that they're not going to get to meet other people on campus. And then we've heard the other, where that the support network is so critical for a student-athlete to be able to have time together, living together, to hold each other to accountability and support each other. Where do you all stand, both from your own experience, how integrated versus isolated was your student-athlete experience in terms of who else did you meet besides other student-athletes? And, would you change anything about that one way or the other?
I think the University of Oregon, in my opinion, really pushes integration within the athletic department. It's not that they discourage you, being involved in other things, and there are student-athletes that I know were heavily involved in other, clubs and organizations around campus, but a lot of what they promoted and a lot of the things that they organized were activities within the athletic department. And that was great, because we had an opportunity to kind of have a close-knit group. But at the same time, I remember sitting in classes and thinking that it was really embarrassing that I didn't even know the people that were in my graduating class. When I went to graduation and walked in graduation, I recognized a few people that I had classes with, but I really, outside of the athletic department, I didn't know people around campus, and that, to me, was a little bit embarrassing. So.
Yeah,
Others, similar kind of sense, or did you have a really integrated experience where friends you look back at from college or friends you've developed at college walk all walks of life?
I had a very similar experience, like just feeling like I knew the team, And at Stanford, they do like a pretty concerted effort to integrate people into the student body. So like I had a random roommate my freshman year, this guy Eric that I didn't know before. I never kept in touch afterwards, and it just I never really invested in the student body. It was, so I think even when they sort of try to force that on you, I was invested in my teammates. Those guys are my friends, and I guess I wish I could do it differently, but I also felt like that's kind of the way it is. It speaks to that idea of wanting to do college a second time. Like I don't want to change the way I did it, but it'd be fun to be able to do it again. Yeah.
I think that's going to happen a lot because just the people that you hang around with and the way that you are personally, that's the way other athletes are. And so that's just kind of like the people that you're going to try to go and hang out with because you have the same interests, you have the same things in common. And so I think it does get kind of hard to not have friends outside of athletics. We've had a great opportunity, like being married. We've kind of had to find the married couple, and that's definitely not in athletics. And so we found some friends and stuff that way. But the majority of the people that we know, the sports and the athletics, are always doing activities together. They're having an athletic talent show. They're having an athletic party, an athletic get together before school starts, and it's only athletes that are invited. And so that happens a lot, and so I do think that, but I think even outside of that, if we had the opportunity to spend more time with people outside of athletics, we would choose the athletes just because that's who we are. Like that's the kind of people that you hang around with because you want somebody that's going to push you to be better, and that tends to be those people.
Yeah. Sorry. I totally agree with what he's saying. I think a lot. For me, it was I hung out with a lot of the baseball players because we had similar schedules and we had similar interests and stuff like that. But I feel like also at Creighton, it was such a small school that there's 5,000 undergrads that I felt like it was pretty integrated as well, and I made some good connections with a lot of my other classmates outside of baseball. So I definitely don't think I would change too much about that.
I think there's some mixed messaging though sometimes because, maybe this is just what I default to, but like if I'm talking to a group of high school kids that wants to know about how do you be successful, in academics and athletics, at the collegiate level, and it's like, you take the three sort of things, it's academics, athletics, and social life, right? And there's this sort of like maybe old school sort of conventional wisdom that you can really only do two of those three things well. And you solve that problem, I always think, by combining two of those. So somehow you have to combine either academics and social life or athletics and social life. And I chose to combine my athletics and my social life. And so in order to actually do those three, distinct sort of categories of college well, I think you kind of have to combine those two. And so, it'd be very difficult to be totally alienated from your team. So by default, I think that's what most of us end up doing.
Right, and one of the things that we've often seen is that there's these pivotal moments in your time as a student athlete. Each of you have described largely really positive experiences, right, where you've gotten a lot out of it. You're all on a nice trajectory towards success, but either you've had teammates that haven't followed that trajectory, or you've had moments where one wrong decision and maybe your trajectory would have been altered. What are some of those most challenging moments that you've either come in contact with vicariously or directly that have threatened that student-athlete experience for either yourself or others to be such a positive experience? And Shannon, feel free to jump in on this one too. If you've had a couple times where we've talked about resilience in the past, and resilience comes from the fact that you've had some tough situations that you've had to overcome, right? And you've done really well on the end of that. But some other folks may have been left by the wayside in those similar situations.
All right, well, I'll just share that there's a lot of research on proximity and how the people that you're near is really what's going to help influence you. And so you guys talk a lot about the people that you've chosen to be near you and let into your athletic world, because it's kind of a sacred world for you. You want to make sure that it doesn't get messed up. And so that's, I think, something that you guys have really reached out to people. You guys describe mentors, you describe relationships with people. For example, Stitson's wife, Bethany, has been a huge piece of his success. And so that's, really consistent with, the research, but the opposite is also true. And so I think what I had seen when I would see people that weren't as successful is when they would choose people that were partying or out drinking or, just not making the great decisions towards a career and towards athletic, optimizing their athletic performances. And so that's what I saw. And so I think relationships are huge. I think that's honestly the cornerstone of resiliency. And that's exactly what, if you went back to one of my SCI TV interviews on resiliency, it's exactly what I tried to describe. And so that's what I've seen in my experience. And so please add to that as much as you want.
Yeah, one of the challenges, what have been some of those challenging moments or other things too that have, and you've seen some of it. You've had teammates that haven't come out and stayed with their athletic career, or they've come out with a poor education or whatever else you've seen. Right? You guys are all pretty good success stories here, but what were some of the reasonings behind things that didn't go as well?
I mean, one of the things that was challenging for me, and maybe this speaks to it, was I was living with, all through college, after my freshman year, for the next 4 years, I lived with teammates with, between 2 and 6 other teammates. And with that number of people, it's never going well for everybody. You always have some people who are struggling. They're injured or they're just not running well, whatever it is. And by nature, I guess, or maybe it was just the team I was on, there's a disparity in how people are treated on a team. And that's, I think that there is an objectivity to it. But it's hard to swallow sometimes, even if it's perceived, sort of lack of attention or whatever. So it's difficult. If things were going well for me and not for my roommate, that was actually more challenging than looking back on that I would have maybe expected that it would be. That was hard to really feel bought into a program, bought into a coach, which I was, and also be able to support these people as friends and teammates who were struggling with it sometimes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think that in my experience, one of the things that I've seen with teammates that I've had was just a difference in opinion, or maybe a difference in personality with coaches. And it's kind of interesting that you can be recruited by a coach, and then, you know, a year or 2 years in, you just decide that you don't necessarily see eye to eye with that coach. And I've had quite a few teammates at the University of Oregon that have, at one point or another, you know, decided that they would probably be happier playing somewhere else for whatever reason it was. And two of those, you know, whatever plans they had after they transferred didn't pan out, and so they're, you know, just here at the University of Oregon, and they're still trying to go to school, but they're just partying and, you know, failing all their classes, and their parents are, you know, not very happy about having to pay for their college now. And so I think that, in my experience, it's just been a difference in opinion, you know, with coaches. When I was at Weber State, between my sophomore and junior year, my coach resigned, and I, you know, had to go through a coaching change, and that was really, really difficult for me because I didn't necessarily, you know, I kind of felt like I was cheated because I didn't have the choice to decide to play for a coach, you know, that I felt like I didn't pick. It wasn't the one who recruited me, and it wasn't, you know, necessarily someone that I felt like I would play for. So, you know, just in my experience, I think it's been a lot of controversy between players and coaches that's maybe changed a positive experience into a negative one.
Great. Any other thoughts on that topic before we start to shift towards final thoughts here? Okay. So what I'd like us to do to wrap this fantastic conversation is, I was a big Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure fan, and so I love the concept of being able to give advice that crosses time barriers. So if you could imagine giving advice to, you know, a version of yourself that's starting this whole process all over again, right, as a student athlete, whether you're back in high school and you're trying to make your decision about where to go and contemplate how to get the most out of that student athlete experience, what one or two pieces of advice would each of you give to that version of yourself to alter the history of time again? And let's start with Zach, and then we'll kind of work our way through the panel.
Wow. I would say, you know, first of all, is just, if I could tell myself some advice, I would say to spend more time on, you know, really figuring out what I wanted to do after my playing career. You know, when I was in my undergrad, you know, really focusing on what I think I would like doing and what I would be good at, and really putting more time and effort into that instead of just kind of picking a major. That's kind of how I feel like I went about it. So I think that would be number one, and then number two would be to focus more on. I think for me, like, the biggest thing, like, I've noticed it as an older athlete, and this is more of a, like, just on the athlete side of it, is I would focus more on, like, rest, getting better rest, getting better nutrition, injury prevention, all of that stuff. Because in my career, I dealt with a lot of injuries, and looking back, I think some of those things I could have done better, I didn't put enough time into. So I think now, just if I could go back, I would focus on those things that are just taking care of my body and my mind, and in doing that in a better way. So I think those would be the two key things I would tell myself.
Fantastic. How about you, Shannon? We'll skip to you now.
Oh, me? Well, I'm a co-host, but I'll
put you on the spot because you have good insights to offer here. So if you go back in time, you talk to, you know, future Shannon going through it all over again, or past Shannon, what do you say to yourself?
Well, actually, I really strongly regret my initial college choice. And so if I would have been able to predict the future, I would have told little 18-year-old Shannon to not leave home, not go halfway across the country, and probably stay in my backyard, and kind of remembering, like, the support that I have close to home, and, like, with my family and my friends. And so I would have the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And so that's probably what I would have told myself.
Yeah, that resonates loudly. I had a very similar, the whole recruiting process of just trying to decide what school, and the criteria that I probably used was probably really poor. And if I could have had a little more disciplined approach to which criteria, I think I would have had a better student athlete experience, more similar to what you all described as well.
Yeah. And the thing is like, your family wants you to make that decision for yourself, and so they're doing their best, but they also want you to make that decision, which I love the autonomy that they gave me, but at the same time I'm like, just maybe I could have had a little bit better criteria. So definitely.
Great. And Stetson and Bethany, how about the two of you?
Go ahead.
All right. So I think I would definitely use the resources better. Use more of the resources and taking advantage of that and the opportunities that we have here. And I also would have, not that I don't love the University of Oregon, but I would have gone on more recruiting trips. Once I got offered by Oregon, I just didn't go anywhere else. I didn't look at any other colleges. I was like, I'm going to go there. So I think it would have been a fun opportunity, especially where I had an offer from a school down in Utah where my wife was already playing. And so it would have been better for me to take the opportunity to take more recruiting trips and see what other schools had to offer. I kind of got stuck into a business law school where I think I should have taken other ways and looked at different options instead of just looking at the sports aspect of things.
Yeah, I think just a couple things as far as the overall experience. I wish I would have taken more opportunities to become more well-rounded. Now that I'm not playing volleyball anymore, I think about like what are my hobbies, and I really honestly am kind of embarrassed that I don't have other hobbies. I have a lot of friends that are really crafty and like to do those kinds of things. Friends that like to go hiking and things like that. And so I wish I would have taken an opportunity to become more well-rounded and to kind of explore. Just from an athlete perspective, I wish I would have spent more time by myself in the gym. I think that if I could do it all over again, I would put in the extra effort and take the time that I needed to fine-tune the skills that would have helped me to be more successful. I think those are two things.
Fantastic. And Ian, I'm going to have you have the closing advice to past version of yourself, because I know you're going to knock it out of the park.
Thanks, Josh. Maybe I'll disappoint you then, because I actually don't have a lot of regrets from college. I think most of the mistakes I made post-collegiately, which probably speaks to the support system that I didn't really think I was taking advantage of at Stanford. I think we had a great support system. And, I mean, athletically, I ran well. I was part of a great team. I think I was at the right place for me. It was the right combination of athletics and academics. I had great coaches throughout, even though I went through a coaching change. I think I did a really good job of believing in those coaches, and my timing was great, which allowed me to run professionally post college. And so I think the one thing that I would change is I would work really hard to develop at least one, hopefully more than one, relationship with faculty at the university. I look back and I literally don't have any relationships with any of the professors I have. Even my academic advisor, I'm not in touch with anymore. And I really regret that. Those are really hard to go back and rebuild after you leave. And so that's probably the one real tangible thing that I would change.
Great. Great advice all around. I want to thank you all for really a fantastic conversation today. I think so much reaches the media that sounds very negative about the student-athlete experience, and lots of talk about the need for substantial reform, and maybe there is need for a lot of that, but they're dismissing the number of student-athlete experiences that are largely positive, and I think each of you certainly came out on the other side of your student-athlete experiences in a really positive way and are doing great things out there in the world. So thank you each for sharing some of your thoughts and insights today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did, and I know our audience will as well.